this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to our special series of Let's Talk Kubernetes for KubeCon. And my next guest is once again Priyanka Sharma, General Manager of Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF. Priyanka, it's great to see you again on the show.
So nice to see you too, Swapnil.
It has been an exciting show despite COVID, all the precautions the Linux Foundation and CNCF took to ensure that everybody is safe and healthy. The turnout has been great. But I want to hear from you because you have been part of this committee for so long. And KubeCon is where we met as well. So, how has been the show so far from your point of view, from your perspective?
Wow. For me, this show is, I say this in my keynote, I say this in the theme. It's our resilience realized. And what I mean is that all of us went through a topsy-turvy world for the last year and a half, but we were resilient through it. We worked through it. And our hope, dream was to be able to meet back in person someday, to enjoy a KubeCon someday, and we did it. And so it's a joyous time here. People are super excited. It's also very it's a time that really demonstrates how awesome we are as a community, because I'm proud to tell you, people are following the rules, people are doing the right thing. I'm not seeing people taking masks off. I'm seeing folks, respect people's boundaries. We have this like traffic light system. I actually can't find my bracelet just now, but it's basically red, yellow, green. And if someone's green, you can come closer. If they're yellow or red, you best to give them lots of space. And people are doing that. People are working very hard to make sure all of us are safe and comfortable.
Yeah, and if you look at CNCF or Cloud Native community, open source communities are very warm, very welcoming. But the work you folks have done is also you have created an environment people feel comfortable. They can be themselves because most of us are also introvert, right? So we cannot feel very comfortable. So you do create that everybody can be there, irrespective of where they are from, what their cultural background are. So thanks for doing that. Now let's talk about some technical aspect, which is like it was a big event. I'm so happy that you folks did it in person. A lot of announcements were there, so I cannot even go through all of them. So I want to hear from you. What are the key ones? Of course, you have to pick a favorite baby, but even if I put you in a tight spot, that what are the some major news or highlights that you want to share today?
Yes, absolutely. So as you said, there is a lot of news at KubeCon, CloudNativeCon. Every day, Chad and his team, they send me the list of media coverage, and I'm just like, whoa, that's more than most companies receive in a year. So it's really good stuff. In terms of cool latest information, I would say from the technical perspective, I'm really happy that Cilium has joined CNCF as an incubating project. Cilium has its own community, really cool people, and they are joining us to be part of the larger cloud native ecosystem. So that was awesome from my perspective. I think we also had a survey that we did recently. We call it a micro survey, where we looked in the cloud native community about how things are around security, software security. And what we found that like 90% or something of folks said that security is a major concern. There are lots of issues showing up and everybody's talking about it. But ironically, only 9% of folks said that their organizations are prepared with the set of processes and practices that you need to follow to be a security first company. And that was a very eye-opening moment, I think, just simply because of the attention that has gone into security in the past few years, I would say. And I mean, of course, now things are at a different level with the executive order from the United States president, of course. So those are some two big things. There's a sister foundation of CNCF and Linux Foundation called Open Source Security Foundation. And they had been, they were in existence for the last year, but now they are coming out in full force. They have raised $10 million and are inviting people to come talk about SBOM in their ecosystems. So those are some key announcements. Of course, on the community front, I would like to add that we have announced the Cloud Native Credits Program. This is inspired by the very generous donations done by Equinix Metal, Google, GitHub, Amazon Web Services to support CNCF projects with meaningful donations of infrastructure and CI credits. We literally need those for the projects to run on a daily basis. And so we're very grateful. And we want to open the doors for other companies to be able to do the same. And the Cloud Native Credits program is soliciting interest from folks who want to do that. I was so impressed by how much paying it forward is a part of this ecosystem. When I shared this program with a few folks, one of them was one of our new members, Cox Communications, and they were so great. They immediately were like, "Oh, we're interested. We want to support the projects. By the way, we have a brand new Edge Lab coming out, and we'll give credits from that as much as projects need in the 500,000 plus tier." And so they're just starting off, and others are coming in. So it's pretty cool.
In today's world, especially cloud native, everybody wants security. We also talk about, hey, in cloud native, security is no longer an afterthought, but it's still a big challenge for people to put that in practice. That's where technological challenges happen, and more than technological, people or cultural challenges happen. Because if you look at CNCF landscape, you have all the technologies there. So what are you did mention about some trends, but I want to understand from you, because you have talked to so many people, what trends are you seeing where people, it's easy to talk about security, but the challenging part is to actually implement it, deploy it, and bring it in practice. What are you seeing there?
So you're absolutely right, Swapnil, that everybody wants to talk about security, and it seems like no one really knows how to go actually be a secure company. And this is not a dig on the companies. I 100% see how this is a moving target at all times. I think Brian from Open Source Security Foundation shared that attacks are up 650%. And folks who look for vulnerabilities, folks who look for weaknesses in systems and processes, they are also evolving and growing, right? So they are developing their skill set, and so they're more sophisticated as time goes on. And so that's why this security is such a big challenge for companies. It's a moving target. It's a very tough situation we find ourselves in. And I think that there are various ways companies are trying to approach it. So the first thing that I think is good is that at the highest levels of every company, people are talking about the security issue. From the CISO to the CEO to the engineering managers to the rank and file developers, everyone cares. That's a huge win already, because often in technology, you're stuck in situations where some segment of the company does not find that a meaningful discussion. So that's number one, that's good. Second is, I think the executive order in the United States has definitely raised awareness, but it's also put the onus on companies to kind of figure this out, right? And so that's a tough spot. I think what folks are doing right now, there is a mad dash to find projects and vendors that can maybe support the security story. And so I think that's also why you see the fundraising in the security-based startup space is completely wild right now. And good for them. Of course, it's great. But we see all this happening. I think the piece that must happen, which maybe is a little bit more work in progress than other things people are doing, is understanding that security is not just about buying a tool or finding a throat to choke, but rather changing the people process tools here. You need to have a security first mindset in your DevOps lifecycle. You know how we talk about shifting left. Everything, unfortunately, is falling on developers now. It shifts left to the developer. So for them, I think over time, we were able to successfully help more and more developers be operationally minded at the very least. And now that shift is happening to be security minded. And I think there are definitely tools out there that help with code scanning as you're going, that, the DAS, SAST, all of that. Things are getting more incorporated into the developer tool chains. And all that's excellent. But I would say the number one thing that people need to do is the leadership of all these companies needs to do is understand that they will not get to the outcome they want by just buying something. They need to work with their talent to get the right processes in place.
If you look at the whole cloud native or Kubernetes landscape, things have moved to production, things are being deployed. It's seeing new use cases also, just like Linux. Kubernetes is being used in so many use cases. Edge is also becoming exciting use case. 5G is also use case. If I ask you, if you look at 2020, what are the challenges that you see this adoption will bring, or where do you see the community and the projects will go? Because CNCF landscape is massive today.
Yes, yes. I mean, we say CNCF landscape's massive, but remember 2 years ago, we said CNCF landscape was massive. We've survived just fine. But you have a very valid question that a lot of growth, a lot of changes. Where are we going? And actually, that's something that's been extensively discussed at this KubeCon, CloudNativeCon, and various types of settings that I've been in. And I think that's a good sign because it means everyone's invested in the strategic direction. What I am seeing happening is that we are verticalizing. And that's by type of companies. They have different workloads, they have different needs, they have different challenges, and also by specific types of tech that need to be worked on. Edge computing is a great example where, when edge first became a thing, it felt like the antithesis of cloud native. However, if you look at what's happening now, it's the cloud native developers who are building out edge solutions, who are thinking through how do operations happen on the edge. And we now have projects, as you know, in CNCF like K3S, KubeEdge, and so many more that are about edge computing. And this is just an example. This is a cool, edge is cool, so I'm telling you this example. But this is happening in a lot of other things. This is happening in MLOps. This is happening in, when you even look at different types of runtimes, such as like WASM-based stuff, Rust-based stuff. So ultimately, what I'm seeing is that cloud native has become the scaffolding of all new innovation. And it's the cloud native professionals who are like these change makers. I think we are so lucky because we ended up building this community of people who just like to create awesome stuff and who think end to end about software issues. And so they are now applying that to a very rapidly moving world where the needs are changing at a skyrocketing pace. I think this has happened, everybody knows, because of the pandemic, digital transformation just skyrocketed across companies. Everybody is now a technology company. I mentioned this in my keynote, Swapnil, but I went to Europe a month and a half ago, and I did a roadshow. And I met with a bunch of end users, and I met with Deutsche Telekom, which is a telco. And the end users were like Audi, Daimler, Spotify. And it was amazing just how big of a footprint Cloud Native had in all these very diverse companies. They all have large-scale Kubernetes Cloud Native teams that create the developer experience for the rest of the rank and file developers. And while leadership or at the highest levels, people are like, oh, end users are behind, compared to 2 years ago, I am seeing 10 years worth of change here. So this is happening in all kinds of companies. Embedded systems, automotive is a great example, edge, AI, ML, all that kind of stuff. All kinds of different innovations are happening. And so as we go forward, our landscape, I have news, it's going to get more complex. The good news, I think, is that we won't even notice because it's so complicated now. But just so you know, there's a working group in CNCF, the Business Value Committee, and they are working on demystifying the landscape. And they actually just merged a PR, which when you go to the landscape, you see like the info signs across various parts, and you click them and you get a little bit more description of whether it's a project or where you can get more information. So on tactical level, we're working on it. On a strategic level, we're making it worse.
Before we wrap this up, one thing that I want to talk about, this is something close to your heart as well, which is diversity and inclusion. And Linux Foundation is doing a lot of work. You are driving a lot of initiatives there. When we look at diversity, there are two kinds. One is that you have to do it only for the sake of doing it so people can see everything in PR and marketing. And something is that it comes from within. I feel that in the case of Linux Foundation, it comes from within because the folks there are driven by that. But if I ask you, what are the initiatives that you are involved with? If there is anything specific to either Kubernetes community, Cloud Native community, or KubeCon, share those.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the fundamental pillars of how we operate in CNCF and Linux Foundation. So you're absolutely right that this is a place where DEI is serious. Every KubeCon, I'm happy to tell you, I always, we do KubeCon driven development. And so every KubeCon, we're able to push through a little bit further and do something more. This time round, I'll share a couple of things with you. First of all, I'm proud to tell you that we have done close to 100 mentorships of students and learners already in CNCF through our LFX mentoring program. That is a really awesome thing because 100 people's lives have already been changed. And by the way, when we do this, diversity, DEI is a top priority and selection factor. All the people who get in get a stipend so that they are able to actually work on this without having financial concerns. And we intend to keep growing this program and actually finding new flavors of doing it. That's one. Second is that I am involved with the Inclusive Naming Initiative, which you may have heard of. It is a sister organization to CNCF, but it originated here. And the whole focus for us was last year when we started to remove master slave, whitelist, blacklist, racially charged, exclusionary, problematic terms like this from code. And, most people really want to do that. The challenge is how to do that without breaking changes. So INI has been working on that. And one of the biggest outputs that so there are two ways we've made progress lately. One is that we've created a course with the Linux Foundation training, which is around how to build inclusive communities. And that's been released, and that's including language recommendations. Second is that we initially were just making a list of things to change in code. Now we have graduated to having a 3-tier list where the top level is most egregious, must be changed in code, and here are the ways to do it. The 2nd-tier list is really, really bad. Over time, find ways to phase this out. And then the third is this is something you should not use in content and speech when you are speaking because it is exclusionary, but it is at a point where breaking changes may not be necessary at this point. And we did this because we noticed that even though we started with this very scoped type mission of changing specific terms in code, we got further along in this. And then people started saying, oh, INI has that list. I'll tell my event organizer that that's the list to use for terms speakers shouldn't use, as an example. And I was like, oh, well, this is a very small list, and it doesn't cover the full scope of what would be not okay from a content perspective. And so there was basically a lot of user demand, and we answered it, and that's how INI has evolved. And then last but not least, as you know, the late Dan Khan was a relentless champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion in CNCF and in everything he touched. And so we have decided to rename the KubeCon Scholarship, which helps folks from DEI backgrounds and who have need-based asks to attend KubeCon on scholarship. So now we are announcing the Dan Khan Scholarship Fund.
Oh, that was great. He was, a visionary there, and he did a lot of work. So we all miss him. Priyanka, thank you so much for taking time today from your busy schedule and share not only some of the insight that you saw at the event, but also the things that you folks are working on. And I would love to have you back on the show, and maybe we'll do it next time in person. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Swapnil. Hope to see you again very, very soon.